Welcome to Breaking the News Plus. On this Wednesday night, we are going to have a conversation about paying student athletes, and we're going to be specific to the University of Minnesota. This morning, an article in the Star Tribune caught my eye. The headline was, "How much is the University of Minnesota paying their athletes?" Question mark. They refuse to say. The author of that piece, the journalist behind it, is Alexandra DeYoe. She is the desk editor, the city desk editor at the Minnesota Daily, the college newspaper there that has no rival. It's so good. Thanks for joining me tonight, Alexandra.
Yes, of course. Thanks for having me.
So, we all heard about the court ruling of $20.5 million that schools would get to pay student athletes. NIL, that's the world we live in now. And I assume your goal was to figure out who's getting paid and what at the U.
Yes, exactly.
And so you start asking, and what'd you find out?
We didn't find out much. Through our data request, they didn't cite anything to us. Last June, after the $20.5 million was approved in the settlement, the university's athletic director, Mark Coyle, outlined that football, men's and women's basketball, women's volleyball, and men's ice hockey would be getting priority for these funds, but he wouldn't say how much, and they're still not saying how much we should expect to see these sports teams receive of this $2.5 million. That could be a possibility.
And in your article, you said that the U had a couple of reasons for that. They cited student privacy and trade secrets?
Yeah, they cited for student privacy, it's specifically Minnesota State Statute 13.32, and for the trade secrets, it's 13.37. The university can use those statutes to say we don't want to release data, but we've talked to a kind of public data expert, and he said, well, yeah, they can use those, but not specifically for this data. This is the public institution. They should be sharing this information very candidly with the public. But I will say that there are some other schools out there and other big conferences, including the Big Ten conferences, that aren't sharing this data at all. They're not even outlining which sports teams are going to get the priority. So the University of Minnesota has a step up from that, but they're still not being very clear.
Right. They're certainly not an outlier not sharing the data, but you brought up a lot of really good points that I want our viewers to just listen to and decide on their own if they think that this information should be public. And one thing that kind of talked about it is this idea of, the University of Minnesota Land Trust. It's a public university, and we can find out, because it's a public university, the salaries of staff and employees. All of that stuff is somewhat public, but this is what student athletes get paid is not. And they're saying it's for competitive reasons, but one of the reasons that really stuck out to me is that you don't get to see the difference between sports, right? So should a football player or should a men's basketball player make more money than a women's basketball player? You've got to get into that equity and pay kind of thing, right? Did you come across anything like that?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I was not only looking at the University of Minnesota for this article, I was looking nationwide, and I found that there is this attorney in Colorado named Ashlyn Hare, and she was a part of a lawsuit of 10 female athletes raising concerns about the $2.5 million House settlement, and how, because they haven't stated any Title IX type of requirements or concerns about that these female athletes were concerned if the universities aren't being public with this data, Title IX requirements and equity could go under the rug a little bit.
Sure.
So that's one of the major concerns, besides the public not knowing where's this money going, is this money being spread out fairly?
Right. And then when it comes to the public knowing about money, I don't know enough about the settlement, the $20.5 million that each school gets. Is any of that taxpayer money?
It's a bit confusing. So majority of that $2.5 million comes from the main conferences, which includes Big Ten, SEC, Big 12. There's a fourth one that I'm not remembering, but it comes directly from their revenue, and the revenue includes, TV media sponsorships, it includes ticket sales, includes things like that. So part of it is a little bit of taxpayer money, especially if you donate or you spend money on tickets, things like that.
And I want you to talk about, again, like the University of Minnesota isn't the only school not disclosing this data. It kind of speaks to me of this, once NIL came onto the stage and paying athletes, and then news of this court decision that would allow schools to use this pot of money, once it starts, getting into this like secret of who gets what, it feels even more distant from the idea of amateur athletes and the idea of student athletes. It's more like athlete-student.
Yeah, that's what I'm noticing too when I was doing research for this. It was really focusing on the athletics part of it, and rather than these people being students. I mean, student athletes aren't even considered employees following the settlement still. So a lot of people are raising concerns about that, about are we getting them too professional almost, is what I've been seeing a little bit. But I don't know. I don't have a lot of total background on NIL or the history behind that and how people reacted to that.
And it's interesting, the term trade secrets, right? The word secret implies, like, to me as a kid learning that word, like, we don't want you to know something. And so school A doesn't want school B to know how much they're paying, because school B could be like, well, I'll pay that player more than you. Is that kind of the idea behind trade secrets?
That's what I've been hinting at through my conversations with other schools' PR people, is that they're not disclosing this information because they want a competitive disadvantage against other schools. So if other schools know how much they're paying their athletes, then they can help determine how they should pay their athletes and make them more attractive to student athletes through the transfer portal, which allows student athletes to have the freedom to move to any school they wish based on how much they're going to be paid. See, the trade secrets, it has a certain tone to it, definitely.
What did you take away from, this assignment? Obviously, you're with the Minnesota Daily. You have an internship with the Star Tribune. You're a brand new journalist, somewhat new. And, what did you learn here? What should be the takeaway from the public?
Gosh, I think the major takeaway is that this stuff is so convoluted and complicated, and it's all connected, usually in some way, shape, or form. I think it's really hard for the public to understand if you're not operating in these systems already, if you're not a student athlete, if you're not an athlete at all, especially if you're not somebody who understands a bunch of legal jargon and things like that. So it was very hard to become a mini expert for this story, and I can't imagine trying to read my article and wrap your head around it as quickly as you would like to.
Sure. And I think that we should note for the folks that maybe are a little bit new to this or somewhat new to this, I am too, when we see numbers thrown around like, let's say, Caitlin Clark or Paige Beckers gets $10 million in NIL money, that isn't information coming from the school. That's information coming from like their agents or they themselves. It's not like the school is telling what it's paying the athlete.
No, the NIL and schools' direct payment to athletes are completely two separate things, and they are not shared in any way or connected. NILs comes from third parties who are facilitated through usually outside branches. For example, for the University of Minnesota, there's an agency called Dingytown Athletes, which helps student athletes at the university enter into NIL deals. The University of Minnesota does not do that.
Okay, so what you were writing about, that $20.5 million, that's specific to what the University of Minnesota pays the athletes on the teams that it said it was going to pay the athletes. But it's not telling us the breakdown, which team gets what, which player gets what.
Exactly, yes.
So potentially there could be two pots of money for a really good player, right? There could be NIL money and then you money.
Yes.
That's a lot of money.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, lots of money coming from different places.
Do you intend to follow up on this? Like perhaps that the U would change its tune? Do you foresee anybody you talked to was saying lawsuit kind of deal to get this data?
I haven't heard anything about lawsuits specific to the University of Minnesota. There was some lawsuits in New Mexico, which I mentioned in my article, but I'll obviously keep my eyes and ears open about this issue. It's a very interesting one that I'm now just entering in and learning about. But yeah, I would like to follow up with it maybe in the future, but I'm not going to put all my eggs in one basket quite yet.
Yeah, that's first rule of journalism. You got to kind of move on. But but keep your ear to the ground on this one. Alexandra DeYoe from the Minnesota Daily with this excellent article in today's Star Tribune. Urge you to check it out about how the university is paying its athletes. Well, they won't say, but Alexandra will explain to you why. Thanks for joining us on Breaking the News Plus.
Yep. Thank you so much. Have a nice one.
You bet. That's all for this episode. We'll see you back here tomorrow night. Take care.